Hey boys and girls, welcome back. Where we last left off on Sink or Swim, we had just finished chapter 18, and they actually got a U-boat to surrender. So they ended up dropping off those prisoners. They sank the sub, and they were continuing on their journey, but they were still worried about the other U-boats in the wolf pack. And Chief Kerr was very upset because he didn't like the orders that they were given, and so he would have done something different. So he was talking to Colton about that, and he told him about the milch, what milch meant, which was milk. So he told him about the milch subs that were the special subs that would pull up to kind of reload them and give them extra fuel and things like that so they could keep going. So learn something new there. So let's see what happens now. On the second dog watch, I met up with Woody for dinner, which was canned meat and gravy over boiled potatoes and something green next to it that might or might not have been a vegetable. We just called it evening slime. Woody smelled pretty rank as usual, and his clothes and face and hands were grease-stained. He didn't bother washing up, but just dove right into the food, which he obviously enjoyed a lot more than the rest of us. I picked at mine and mostly ate crackers and drank coffee, even though Mama wouldn't ever let me have it back home because she said it would stunt my growth. Nobody said that here, and I figured if there was one thing I did that she wouldn't approve of, better drinking coffee than a lot of other stuff. Nice to get out of that engine room once in a while, Woody said between bites. You know how tight it is back there? And I'm not just talking about the engine room either. I'm talking about where we all bunk. It's a good thing everybody gets along. You sound like you actually like it, I said. Woody nodded. You know, I kind of do. I've even been thinking that after the war, after we kicked Germany's butt and everything, I might even stay in the Navy. He held up a fork full of evening slime. They feed you, give you a place to sleep, teach you a job, and you get a paycheck once a month that you can spend however you want. Can't see what's not to like about it. Another guy sitting with us in the mess scoffed. His name was Fulton. What about getting yourself killed by a torpedo? I can see a lot that's not to like about that. Hadn't happened so far, Woody said, reaching over to scrape my uneaten canned meat and slime onto his plate. Plus, where I'm from, you could get run over by a tractor, stomped on by a horse, all kinds of things. You could spend your whole life cropping tobacco on somebody else's tobacco farm and not have anything to show for it. I don't mind taking my chances on a little ship like this, running up and down the East Coast, getting to go to those bars down in Key West. And I bet they got some good ones in New York City, too. I hope we get Liberty up there once we deliver this convoy back safe and sound. Here's hoping that happens, I said. We already lost one ship. Yeah, but we got one of theirs back, Woody said. Bet that's why they're staying away. Fulton scoffed again. They ain't staying away, farm boy. They're just waiting for us to let our guard down. Woody shrugged and swallowed his last bite of my dinner. I still like it here, he said. Later that same night, I was back on the lookout platform. It was mid-watch, 2 in the morning, and that full moon high above us casting short shadows off the ships. The white foam behind the fantail was practically shining. The PC was quiet, but I knew the whole crew was being vigilant since we were so exposed. It might as well have been daytime, except that then I'd at least have had a chance of seeing a glint of sunlight off a periscope lens, letting me know that we had U-boat company. I knew they were out there, just like Fulton said down in the mess earlier. Down there waiting for us to make a mistake. Well, if anybody did make one, it wasn't going to be me. I doubled my efforts, scanning the horizon with the binoculars and without, straining to pick up any sign of U-boat activity. They often surfaced at night and rode high in the water like in any other ship. I doubted they would do that on a night like this when visibility was so strong, though. The minutes ticked by slower than I could ever remember, and I kept getting more and more anxious, practically giving myself whiplash, turning my head, trying to see everywhere all at once and not wanting to miss anything. Then I saw it, a torpedo maybe a quarter mile away coming right at us, lit up by phosphorus in the water so it gleamed silver. I sounded the alarm and yelled down to the bridge to take evasive action now. The squawk box barked out the order and the engines roared. We shot ahead and then hard to starboard, nearly spinning in a circle, like a matador fighting a bull. The torpedo kept racing right at us, and I couldn't see how it would miss until it did. We had pulled just enough ahead and swung around just enough that it shot right past us and continued harmlessly out into the ocean, thankfully not hitting any of the other ships. The call went out to general quarters, and as guys ran to their posts, our PC swung all the way around and now raced in the direction the torpedo had come from. I was still in the crow's nest and the first to see a second torpedo also coming straight at us. I yelled down to the bridge again, and this time it was easier to dodge. We continued on to where the U-boat must have been, not waiting to get there before the order came to fire the cannon, even though we couldn't see the target. But it had to be ahead of us somewhere, and fairly close by. The shells exploded, sending those giant plumes of water up into the night sky like silver fountains in the moonlight. "Prepare depth charges," the captain barked over the squawk box as we pressed on, our PC going so fast we seemed to be skimming the tops of the waves again. There was no time to climb down from the lookout platform, so I held on as tight as I could and might have been the only one to see the third torpedo just before it hit. The explosion was on our starboard side, and it threw me so hard against the rail that I would have gone over and fallen to the bridge if my safety line hadn't been attached. I must have hit my head because I blacked out for a minute. It had to have only been a minute, because when I regained consciousness, the ship was still rocking wildly from the explosion. I dragged myself up and looked down at the ship where guys were also picking themselves up and going back to their stations. I expected to see torn metal, fires, all kinds of destruction, but the damage must have been under the ship somewhere. And since we weren't listing to the side, I hoped it wasn't too bad. Maybe not a direct hit. Next thing I knew, we were firing back at the U-boat with everything we had. Maybe someone had gotten a sonar ping or visual sighting. My vision had been okay at first, but now I was having a hard time seeing. Something was covering my face, and when I wiped it away, I realized it was my own blood pouring from a gash on my forehead. More explosions threw me down again from the depth charges and the rockets. This time I stayed down, both hands pressed against the wound to stop the bleeding. Something happened. Maybe we scored a hit because there was more firing, machine guns on the aft deck, which meant that we had been in a firefight with the U-boat. Which meant the U-boat had surfaced and was fighting rather than surrendering the way the other one had done. I tried to get up, but must have lost too much blood because I felt faint and sagged back down onto the lookout platform, my legs too weak for me to stand. But I wanted to be down there. I wanted to be helping. I wanted to be shooting guns at those Germans and protecting my friends and my ship. Engines revved and the PC jerked into motion away from the battle. I heard another engine that must have been the U-boat doing the same thing. Both ships were damaged, including, I found out later, our big gun, which was why we couldn't use it in the face-off, and both ships were retreating. I kept hoping I would see the U-boat sink, but it just kept pulling away from us until it was out of sight and out of range. I managed to drag myself down from the lookout platform, though my hands kept slipping because of all the blood. I still don't know how I managed it. When I got to the bridge, I collapsed again, but everything was so chaotic on the ship that nobody noticed at first. Others had been wounded, and the officers and crew were scrambling to help them and to shore up leaks in the bulkhead and make repairs down in the engine room. Oily smoke billowed up from somewhere below, and then I blacked out again. I must have been out for quite a while, because when I woke up, I was below deck in my bunk. It took me a few minutes to figure that out. My head was heavy with bandages wrapped around me like a turban. There was still blood all over the front of my uniform, but it was dried. 2 sailors were talking in low voices nearby, but I only heard part of what one of them was saying. Some guy in the engine room. Pipe burst. Killed instantly. Right away I thought about Woody and tried to sit up. I wanted to go find him to make sure he was okay and that it wasn't him they were talking about, but I was too weak. I collapsed back onto my bunk. My heart raced, and there was a pounding in my head that felt as if it were going to split my skull in two. "Hey now," one of the sailors said. "Easy there, buddy. Just lie back down. You got hurt pretty bad. You can't be getting up." "Was it Woody?" I whispered. My mouth was so dry, my throat parched, that I could barely speak. One of the guys gave me some water. Then I asked again about Woody, my heart sinking at the thought of him gone. But it wasn't him. Woody, they said, had been a hero. One man had died in the engine room when the torpedo partially blew in the side of the ship, but Woody had saved 2 others. He pulled them out to safety, one of the guys said. Burned his hands going back for the second one, too. I couldn't believe it. The guy who didn't know his right from his left, who had the words tattooed on his arms so he could remember, who conked himself out walking into a pipe in the engine room on his first day on the ship, who got so hysterical that he nearly drowned me, and Straub had to knock him out when we went overboard. That same guy had known exactly what to do in an emergency. Not only dragging those 2 men to safety, burning his hands in the process, but, as I later found out, also going back a 3rd time to put out the engine room fire and staying to help shore up the leaks from the blast. "That farm boy?" one of the sailors said, shaking his head. "You never know who's going to come through in a situation like that. Some will just freeze on you, but some, like him, well, it's good to have him on our side, I can tell you that." I must have slept after that, or just drifted back into unconsciousness. When I came to again, head still pounding, but not quite as bad, Woody and Straub were there. "About time you opened your eyes," Straub said. "We were just about to give up on you. Figured we might have to do one of those burials at sea." "Nah," Woody said, waving his bandaged hands. "We're just glad you're okay. They think you might have a concussion. Nice cut on your head you got there, too. Lots of blood." "Yeah," said Straub. "Better take it easy. But they said you could be up and about in a couple of days. Nothing that won't heal right up." "I heard somebody in the engine room I couldn't finish. Woody nodded solemnly. It was Big Carrot, the chief motor machinist mate. He was standing right next to where the torpedo hit and caught the full force of it. Woody shook his head as if he couldn't quite get his mind all the way around what just happened. He didn't seem upset. I guess that would come later. He just seemed bewildered, confused, lost. "They got a couple more of our guys, too," Straub said. "That guy Fulton you were just having dinner with, he caught some metal in his side and bled out. But I'm pretty sure we got a lot more of theirs than they got of ours." I started crying then. I couldn't help it. The tears came on their own and I couldn't stop them, no matter how hard I tried. I turned my face away from Woody and Straub toward the hole and wished I was back home on Ocracoke Island, back in my own house, in my own bed, with my own family. Woody and Straub patted me on the shoulder and left me alone to cry myself back to sleep. And we'll pick up from there next time.